Odysseus emerges from the sea to find life as he hasn't known it for nearly 20 years. A world at peace. Hello and welcome back. Today we are reading the great books of Western civilization, continuing with the Odyssey. This is the Robert Fagles translation, and today I'm going to do books 6 and 7 together, as in my opinion they pretty much cover the same material. While Odysseus sleeps in the bushes, Athena sends a dream to Nausicaa, the young princess of the Phaeacians, convincing her that it would be good for her to go and wash her clothes in the morning in the river to make herself more beautiful and thus attract a husband. The princess wakes and goes to do as the dream suggested, with all of her handmaids by her side. Once they finish washing the clothes, they begin to dance, sing, and play, which wakes Odysseus, who is sleeping nearby. The man emerges from the bushes and begins to draw near, mostly naked. The maidservants flee in terror, but Nausicaa does not. Odysseus greets her with great praise and formality before begging for her compassion and help in getting home. Nausicaa agrees to help him by providing for his needs and leading him to her father. She calls her maids back to her side, who provide him with clothing, food, drink, and oil to bathe with in the river. Nausicaa asks that once they reach the city, Odysseus wait outside, hidden from view, before entering on his own, so as to avoid scandal from onlookers. Once inside the city, anyone can easily guide him to the king's palace. She also instructs Odysseus to directly beseech her mother, the queen, for that is the best way to make sure that his request is heard. Odysseus agrees to this and goes to a grove sacred to Athena to pray as he waits for the princess to drive her carriage into the city. Nausicaa arrives in her chambers in the palace. Odysseus, then, assuming enough time has passed, walks towards the city. Athena appears to him as a little girl that offers to guide him wherever he needs to go, while also shrouding him in a mist to hide him from view of any islanders that may hinder him. As Odysseus admires the city's ships and harbors, Athena explains the origins of the city and the genealogy of the rulers, reminding him that the queen, Arete, is the one he should seek out. She wishes him well, and leaves him at the door to the palace. Odysseus enters, beholding magnificent riches on display, including a lavish vineyard, orchard, and many women skilled at weaving, doing so. He finds the throne room, where there's a bountiful feast to match all of this. It is here that he spies the queen and approaches. He is hidden from view right up until the moment that he throws himself at Arete's feet. Odysseus begs for mercy and help from the queen, the king, and all the other nobles and guests present so that he can return home. King Alcinous rises and guides Odysseus to a seat of honor, seeing to his food, drink, and lodging, pledging also to honor this suppliant with the help of his court in the morning. His hosts are all taken with him, except the queen, who notices that Odysseus is wearing clothes that she herself had made. She asks him directly who he is, and he answers with a short overview of his wanderings since losing his ship before arriving at Calypso's island. He tells the story of meeting Nausicaa, praising her maturity and tact in tending to his needs. The king denounces her lack of sense in not bringing him to the castle herself. Odysseus responds that it was actually his idea not to go together, in order to avoid bringing scandal to the princess, through the suspicion of the townsfolk. Alcinous responds to this by wishing aloud that Odysseus himself could be his son-in-law, before renewing his pledge to ensure that arrangements are made to bring him back home to Ithaca. "Stranger," the white-armed princess answered staunchly, "friend, you're hardly a wicked man, and no fool, I'd say. It's Olympian Zeus himself who hands our fortunes out, to each of us in turn, to the good and bad, however Zeus prefers. He gave you pain, it seems. You simply have to bear it. But now, seeing you've reached our city and our land, you'll never lack for clothing or any other gift." In the words of Achilles, human life is full of either bad or good mixed with bad. That's just how it is. Odysseus knows this better than most. Since he has elected to remain mortal, he must suffer the winds, the rains, and the snows of this life, unlike the gods, who are insulated from all such sufferings. He also must be ready should those other humans he encounters wish him harm, a fear he has upon waking up in this new land as well. Man of misery, whose land have I lit on now? What are they here? Violent? Savage? Lawless? But this is okay for Odysseus. He is fine with being a man, even if it means being a man of misery. Because, despite the sufferings and the risks, He is gaining a lot. The hope of returning home to his family, sure. But also, in these 2 chapters, we are provided with lovely descriptions of a world at peace. Princess Nausicaa and her maids play ball and dance while she daydreams about her marriage someday. Odysseus observes the fast ships of the Phaeacians, manned by sailors rather than soldiers. The abundant orchards, the women weaving clothing, not to mention the king's feast and the hospitality towards strangers. I mentioned the shield of Achilles from the Iliad in my last video. It's an illustration of all that an ancient Greek can experience in life. Both war and peace are depicted there, but peace is the greater part of the shield by far. So peace also covers most of life. Sure, you can forsake that for glory in battle like Achilles did, but it's entirely admirable to seek excellence in the other side of life too. I said much the same thing in my analysis of the last chapter, but I was very surprised to see a confirmation of it so soon here in this chapter. May the good gods give you all your heart desires, husband and house, and lasting harmony too. No finer, greater gift in the world than that, when man and woman possess their home, 2 minds, 2 hearts that work as one. Despair to their enemies, joy to all their friends. Their own best claim to glory. Now, I'm not saying that Odysseus stole my idea, but anyway, there's another line in chapter 7 that adds to our understanding of what heroic virtue includes for a man in a world at peace, coming from the king. I'm hardly one for reckless, idle anger. Balance is best in all things. In other translations, it says moderation instead of balance there, and that's the word that we're going to keep seeing throughout the rest of Greek philosophy as we read. But anyways, From what we know of the ancient Greek world, this would actually be considered a very novel concept. Compare moderation is best in all things to what was considered best at the time of the Iliad. Always be the best, my boy, the bravest, and hold your head up high above the others. Never disgrace the generation of your fathers. That's the opposite of moderation. And since the above quote comes not only from the Iliad, but it's also being spoken to a child, there's a fair argument to say that this is not just a wartime versus peacetime mentality thing, but an ideological development between the Iliad and the Odyssey. I think that books 6 and 7 both serve as a contrast to the struggles and sufferings of both the Iliad and those of Odysseus in his travels. What we see depicted as Odysseus and Nausicaa go about their business on the island is the world of moderation, as distinct from the world of martial virtue. There's an interesting interplay between Odysseus and Nausicaa throughout both chapters. I originally wrote a whole analysis of the entire back and forth of their interactions, as well as those which have to do with it later on, like the conversation between Odysseus and the king or the queen. But I was coming up short on why any of it really mattered in the long run for the story. Maybe you guys can help me out with that in the comments. Knox, however, has an idea, and it has to do with the peaceful world, the world of moderation I was just talking about. He writes, "Almost everywhere in this peaceful world, women have important roles. The Odyssey owes much of its power to enchant so many generations of readers to its elegant exploitation of something that war temporarily suppresses or corrupts, the infinite variety of emotional traffic between male and female. In his treatment of these relationships, Homer displays an understanding of human psychology that many critics have been reluctant to recognize." I could not possibly say it better, and the entire dialogue between Nausicaa and Odysseus, as well as between himself and the queen, is part of that. But you can also say that for almost every interaction between a man and a woman in the Odyssey, including many of the monsters or encounters that Odysseus has in his travels. Story-wise, though, here's what you should notice about all of these conversations to help you understand what's going on and make sure you don't miss anything. Odysseus desperately needs the help of Nausicaa and her family, but he tempers this desperation with a sense of propriety, and also uses his cleverness to avoid frightening her, and keeps her at ease, even when he first emerges from the bushes all butt naked and covered with dirt. Nausicaa, in turn, also maintains a sense of propriety, and ensures that all of Odysseus' needs are met, as is required by the law of hospitality, but she also goes and makes sure that she's not exposed to scandal in doing so. What do I mean by that? I mean that she is worried that the townsfolk, and especially the sailors, will see her with this handsome man and think that she was up to something no good out there in the bushes. She even implies in her explanation that this might hinder her from marrying Odysseus later if she wanted to. So she goes and says that Odysseus should wait outside and wait for her to enter first. King Alcinous, however, tells us this was likely too much caution, and that it would have been better for Nausicaa to just lead him directly into the palace herself. This is Nausicaa being a little overcautious. Fathers being how they are, we can probably trust this and say that if there was any potential for funny business, he would have sniffed it out and mentioned it, and even praised her good sense. Since he doesn't, I interpret this to confirm what we've already been told, which is that Nausicaa's somewhat smitten with Odysseus, and is acting partially out of embarrassment. However, Odysseus, perhaps realizing this, covers for Nausicaa by claiming that that whole exchange was his idea. In doing so, he spares her father's ire and earns his favor by showing such concern for her virtue. So much so that the king just goes ahead and wishes out loud that Odysseus could marry Nausicaa himself. Anyways, if you were ever bored at all during the Iliad when there were long descriptions of this guy cleaving that guy and this guy spearing that guy over and over and again ad nauseum for hundreds of lines, these chapters were for you. This is a peaceful world with social interplay and just regular life going on. But as the queen points out, they still know very little about their guest, and for that matter, neither do we. And perhaps we'll start to learn something of Odysseus' travels in the next book. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment letting me know what you especially appreciated or were interested by, and I will see you in the next video.